The war drags on. Armies eradicate entire nests of dragons, only to be incinerated in turn. Fleets of ships of the line are sent out on suicide missions, cannons pointed not at one another, but into the depths, in dire attempts to eradicate the sea leviathans. Tens or hundreds of thousands of lives are lost in the effort. All nations of the world are on the brink of economic collapse. But to fail in this war would leave only the strongest of dragons to reign, and return to dominance. The effects of this brutal war are felt in every corner of the world, even in the colonies. Waves of refugees flood into Auckton to escape the war-torn home isles. As crop yields fall and throw stock, the colonies are forced to provide more and more food. Though shipping has become somewhat safer thanks to the eradication efforts, thousands of tons of freight have been lost to sea leviathan attacks. The bustling manufactories of the home isles have long ceased functioning, leaving both the colonies and the kingdom in rags. The year is 12 in Bellum. Auckton has grown substantially. The Crown has issued a new prerogative. Turn the refugees into productive citizens. Train everyone who can fight and prepare them for war. Supply the war effort. The world is in ashes, and yet we arrive here today. Welcome, as always, to Auckton, as we herald in an age of expansions and plantations. Hello, everyone. I am the Kumu Courtwade, and welcome back to another episode of Auckton. Take 2, because for some reason, the next about 15 minutes of the voice recording was apparently slowed down in comparison to the video. Like, I split up my voice recordings simply because, like, I've noticed that the video can sometimes get out of sync with what I'm saying. And when I went to add the first and second parts of the voice recording, um, it turns out that they have like a 5-minute difference between the voice recording and the video. Luckily, part 2 is usable and actually in time for some reason. I don't understand it. If anybody knows why CapCut and Audacity don't line up sometimes, let me know. But, yeah, what am I doing now? As I'll explain for the second time. Uh, with the war going pretty badly, well, not badly, I mean, they are, doing a number on the dragons, but with the war costing so much and draining so much of the resource of the old world, I figured that it would make sense for the crown to direct the colonies to establish a lot more of these colonial garrisons. The idea being that these would be used as a training ground, a way to recruit promising colonists and turn them into able-bodied fighters, but also a way to tamp down dissent and keep an eye on both the colonists and colonial rivals during this time of strife. But yeah, just going through here, this little colonial fort has a very similar design to the Star Fort that I built some time ago. Good old Fort Auckton as it looms over the bay. But yeah, using a lot of similar techniques and styles to that fort, using this wooden decking to create the actual deck of the walls. That's where the cannons will go, that's where the people will go, that way they can peer over the sides and be like, what's going on? But yeah, that the decking is made from a pier asset. I couldn't tell you the name of the asset creator, but it comes in a great pack, along with the assets that I actually use in the ports around Auckton. Highly, highly, highly recommend you get that, along with these palisade walls, which are awesome and I've used all over the place, made by Do Not Eat for his Franklin series. I've used quite a few assets by Do Not Eat. Uh, the wigwams in the pre-colonial era were his, along with the Georgian row houses that are a staple of Auckton's architecture, much to my dismay. But yeah, just coming in here and putting this little staircase in to provide access up to the walls. Then, because I didn't know what else to do, putting a second row of those palisade walls on the interior just to close off that weird place underneath the deck. In real life, as in Auckton, the walls of these colonial forts would be used for things like storage, for like ammunition and supplies, but also things like barracks and, you know, other things a fort actually needs. Uh, I found out that apparently terrain conforming assets do not work with procedural objects, or maybe they do, and I just don't understand it, which is very possible, but regardless, I was searching for something to put above this like entrance into the fort that wasn't terrain conforming, so I was left with like this barn fence. But oh well. Off camera, I put those cannons in just to, you know, actually have the fort make some sense. The vast majority of the cannons are, not the vast majority, but the majority of the cannons are facing toward the waterfront, whereas if you'll notice, there's actually a good few cannons pointed inland, which kind of, you know, tells you what the crown is really worried about. So, from what I can tell in my research, these colonial forts were never really empty, um, even though I kind of thought they were originally. Rather, both the big forts and the small forts had these, they actually had quite a few buildings in them. Obviously, you saw me put one in earlier, um, but, you know, I figured this would probably be a building for officers, or just barracks, you know, what have you. A nice place to sleep. But yeah, playing a lot more with procedural objects than I normally do this episode. I've been coming to realize that procedural objects is just a really powerful mod and is very useful for just working on, you know, everything really. Uh, like if there's a quirky corner that I can't find a good asset for, use procedural objects. For making detailed and highly custom stuff like this, procedural objects. Those two brick buildings are PO. The decking is PO. That little shed where the horses are under, that's PO. You know, it's PO all the way down. And I'm coming to really love the mod. But yeah, the majority of the area around the fort is cleared out of trees. That way, you know, the guards actually have a good sight line of what's near them. Um, and I placed down a bunch of bushes near to the fort, and later, I guess, off camera, as we switch to another project, around the fort just to make it more difficult for invaders to actually get close to the fort. Um, some time ago, when I built this highway going out of the city of Auckton and what was before the, you know, Fort Auckton, uh, I'd straightened it to kind of accommodate that survey system, but I decided to kind of make it be a bit more natural as it moseyed through the countryside. Here, I'm employing a technique I learned from Jeremy Thunder. He is a great channel, and I highly recommend going to watch his new Kanto series where he's recreating the Pokemon region. I recently rewatched his old series, Scylla Republic, which is a big inspiration for me. And I really liked the way he did his cliff sides with the rocks, and I never really considered doing it this way before. So I use procedural objects to place the rocks in a position where I like, that I feel makes sense with the hillside, and then come through with a bush used in the map to hide all of the seams between the rock and the ground. Then come in with more layers of bushes just to provide more detail and make it make more sense. Before finally doing this layer of trees to blend it in with the surrounding forest. And altogether, I think that makes for a very consistent and good-looking landscape. Especially because the terrain near this, river is so extreme that I had to accommodate it somehow, or else the road would just be going up like a 25-degree slope, which is not realistic. You can see there I have a copy of the fort that I made at the start of this episode. Uh, rather than their, I can't speak today. Rather than making a bunch of individual unique forts, which would take a lot of time and a lot of my sanity, I simply copied the forts around the place in positions where I think make sense in order to just provide more security for the colonies and, have them feature a little bit more around the place. Even though they're not unique from one another, it saves time, and I think the project looks better as a result. Here, I'm just using these pre-existing highways, and I'm adapting them to deal with the survey grid that we established. As I expanded across the river to accommodate a new town. You can see that the fort is called Fort Yorkford, and that's because this area is going to be the town of Yorkford. The Colonial Settlement Corporation, which is the corporation that founded the city of Auckton, I imagine would have been chartered to accommodate the large amount of refugees coming from the home isles and turn them into productive citizens. So here, where this highway, goes about its merry way, the intersection between the highway that comes out of Fort Auckton and this older one, I imagine would kind of naturally turn into a Y intersection as time went on, as the merchants and whoever travels goes about different directions. But yeah, Fort, the town of Yorkford, I took in a very slightly different direction than the city of Auckton. The survey grid is still the same, and I try my best to sort of adapt it to the pre existing roads, but the blocks of Fort Yorkford are about half the size of the city of Auckton's grid. Here, I'm just placing down a bunch of buildings that I think would work. I figured I would show this episode because I found kind of creating a template of buildings that seem to work decently well together is very useful for kind of like establishing the vibe of a settlement. So here, like you can see that a lot of these houses are from the same like pack, but don't vibe with the time period. So yeah, I'm just going through here and placing a bunch of stuff. Uh, then once all of the assets that I think actually fit the vibe, they pass the vibe check. Once they get in here, I drag them to where I think they should go. This big brick building in the center, I imagine, is a town hall, or at least some sort of government administration. That building that I'm circling around because I realized it didn't have a back wall on one of its wings, and I got very confused by that. That's a pub, so like yeah, I'm trying to kind of establish lore for a lot of the buildings that I'm placing down. Here I'm just dragging a building simply to cover up a parking lot, and that's the lore of that building. But yeah. This town I'm trying to do a little bit differently than the city of Auckton. The city of Auckton was established because, the plantation economy was booming, and, a lot of the older towns were basically slums, um, and didn't make for very productive settlements. This city is essentially being created to house a bunch of refugees and turn them into productive members of society. Um, Essentially, these refugees would not be the slaves, would not be the indentured servants that came over so commonly beforehand. These would be free citizens of the Kingdom of Frostock that are fleeing the home isles, essentially to get away from the war. Um, I mean, obviously, I'm calling them refugees, right? But yeah, so I imagine these people would be, selling pretty much everything they have to their name in order to secure passage to the colonies. So as a result, they wouldn't be entering into a contract of indentured servitude. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them would be, actually, but the point being is that a lot of these people are. But yeah, you can see me here just dragging over these Georgian row houses again by Do Not Eat, uh, which I believe he made for what I know he made for the Franklin series. Also, go watch that. Very good. Um, but yeah, just trying my best to create a sort of varied style. I wanted this to obviously make sense in a sort of late 1600s, early 1700s sort of time frame, but something I dislike about the city of Auckton is how samey it looks throughout a lot of this city. I dislike that monotony, if that makes sense. That's why I don't like grids, even though it's very period appropriate. But yeah, again, struggling with procedural objects as I continue. It's a common theme through this episode. But yeah, I decided to place down the town well and give it a little bit of a actual shelter, which I thought made sense, to prevent tree leaves and rambunctious teenagers from just. Actually, as I say that, I realize the rambunctious teenagers could still throw rocks in the well, but say la vie. But yeah, just coming through here doing the typical style of a row of Georgians, and behind that is a row of Trinity houses, even though, again, like I said, the majority of these new citizens in Yorkford would be free citizens. It doesn't mean they have to live well. So, yeah, these are a set of Victorian houses that I found on the Steam Workshop. And even though they are Victorian, at least in name, I actually think they work very well as a like generic house, if that makes sense. They aren't very detailed, or at least not excessively so. And I think they look generic enough where they fit really well in this time period, actually. So I'm placing down a whole bunch of these little guys all over the place. Although later on, you'll see me delete a bunch of them as well, sort of trying to just fade out the dense core of the town into the countryside. Without that sort of low density farming bridge that Auckton has, it is a little difficult to uh, manage to fade it in nicely. I do think I manage it pretty well, but yeah. Yeah, you can see there on the left that I deleted a bunch of the houses to sort of fade it out. Going in here with Surface Painter to dirty up the town, I have found that my favorite dirt decals, which I place religiously everywhere, look great and are not great for performance. I still place them down religiously. You can see me making a 3x3 grid of them here to copy and paste around. But the dirt surface in Surface Painter, I believe it's the ruined surface in this theme mix. It gets most of the way there, and as long as I just fade the edges of it into the grass with the dirt decals, it looks good, in my opinion. But yeah, off camera you saw, or you can now see a bunch of farms that I placed down, along with some of these lower density houses. Uh, I decided not to use the older houses that I have been in Auckton, namely the I don't know what prop pack it is, or what the pack is, but the ones they have the thatch roofs and half timber exterior. I decided instead to use these stone ones to kind of like mirror that this is sort of a planned new community. And then just going through with, the resource brush to actually make these farms work. Um, as I finish up what is New Yorkford currently, uh, once again just going through with the dirt decals. Yeah, I mean, not much to be said. But yeah, some final details that I decided to do other than the trees. Or have I already done the trees? I think I may have already done the trees. Looks like I did the trees. So, this colony as a whole is based on Louisiana, of which I am a native. And what is more Louisianian than the balconies in front of the French Quarter? Uh, of course, Auckton is not French. It does not have French influence. But regardless, I wanted a way to make these make this village different than Auckton in some way. So I decided to use these French Quarter balconies that I believe were made by King Leno, um, to sort of just add another layer of detail to the central square, which I also filled with those market stalls just to add a little bit more detail, and they also work as commercial buildings, so, you know, the game is constantly yelling at me that I don't have enough commercial, which is true, but there's really not many period appropriate commercial buildings on the workshop that I can find. Um, this is a pub. There were a lot of pubs. There are a lot of pubs in Auckton and in colonial life and real life. Um, I realize now there's a satellite dish, but we're just going to ignore that. On to the third project of this episode. Um, I decided to sort of spruce up the area around Fort Auckton once again. So I'm building a blacksmith. I demolished a couple of the low density houses right by the fort, and am using procedural objects to just mess around with a couple of props that I thought would work decently well uh, to make a blacksmith. The thought was there would be this, on the right there by the church. There's that building that I imagine would be the blacksmith and his family's. That would be the apartment, along with their commercial storefront there at the bottom, where they would sell their non-military wares. The bridge arch, the idea was, well, Auckton is very flammable. A lot of its construction is wooden. So the thought was, that bridge arch would serve sort of to protect the town at large from any flames escaping the furnaces. I mean, maybe it's a little defeated with the thatch roof, but don't have to analyze everything. But yeah, I also downloaded those little furnace assets, but I decided that they were a little too small for my use. Fencing in the blacksmith itself with these really nice fences, I decided to kind of break them down, like use the broken ones a little bit, because I imagine this place probably has caught on fire a number of times. I'm using these big furnace, or not furnace, chimney props that I believe come with like a barn prop pack. It's the same prop pack as the thatch roof over the blacksmith actually. And then I use the French market prop pack to place down those workbenches, and then a couple of little barrels by the furnaces. Either I imagine either those are water to put out fires that break out, or barrels of oil to like douse weapons in once they come out of the furnace. But yeah, I make the chimneys a lot bigger in order to put these little flame emitter props inside of them. You can see I also put those smoke emitter props up at the chimneys. That way, smoke actually comes out. And in the end, I think it looks pretty badass. I posted a picture of this on the City Skylines subreddit. So this is now canonically Bert Holt's blacksmithy. Um, But yeah, just as some final details for this, I'm putting a bunch of crates around. These are probably weapons or either raw metal that are to be shipped out or have just arrived. I also put a couple of horses around the place. Either, I don't know if this is owned by the blacksmith or, you know. But yeah, as for our final thing that we're doing today, I am expanding out the farms of the city of Auckton uh, to accommodate both the food and material needs of the crown, and also to give a better border between the city and the countryside. I will admit I'm pretty bored of expanding out these rows and rows of Georgian row houses, so for the time being, I'm sort of kind of putting a giving myself a barrier for the city. Uh, and yeah, we will obviously expand farther than where the farms are now. But I wanted to kind of close off Auckton for the moment. At least until we move on to the next time period, which will be coming soon, I hope. Uh, Next, I copied over the governor's mansion from his estate. I know it's probably not great that I'm reusing a house for another property, but frankly, I don't have many good mansion assets, and while I could probably find a decent enough house to just merge or clip into each other to make something nice, like I did with the Black and Bridgewhite estates a couple episodes back, I don't know. I felt like this is just a generic plantation. It's not important to the storyline. I just needed something to fill the space. So yeah, this plantation occupies most of the block. You can see a little corner there is taken up by some wheat farmer. I imagine the plantation owner is rather annoyed at that wheat farmer for like refusing to sell his land or something. But yeah, just your standard plantation, a big old field for cotton, and then unfortunately some housing for slaves, along with a little field in order to feed the slave population. Hedging in the plantation owner's house in order to kind of provide that difference between where the work is and where the leisure is. Uh, but yeah, that's more or less that property. For the one of, if not the final farms that I actually showcase in this video, I wanted to do something a little different. Um, as as I've been told and as I know, I've discussed it before on this channel. There are so many horses in Auckton, and I am genuinely sick of it. I'm so excited for cars. But anyway, I decided to make this another like stable slash horse breeding facility, and to provide them a little bit of extra money and make this property a little bit more substantial. I put these apple orchards in. I mean, horses like apples and people like apples, so why not? But yeah, just going in here, just doing these couple rows of apple trees just to fill in the gaps, and then coming in with a fence and finishing off this property. Pretty simple, light detail, but I think it looks pretty nice in the end. But yeah, evidently I lied to you. There are a couple more houses. I guess I'm doing another cotton plantation here. Yay. But yeah, just more of the same. So, where does Auckton stand now? Well, the Crown is increasingly becoming desperate for resources, men, and money. The colony of Auckton is being put under a monumental amount of strain because of this. That's why we have to found a new town. That's why there's so many new farms. That's, the reason there's a whole blacksmith making his job now supplying weapons to the military. I imagine we will see the fallout of this strenuous relationship between the Crown and Auckton blossom into something that us Americans might be familiar with. But yeah, just kind of I don't have much more to say. I mean, I'm just doing more of the same. I've done a whole episode on these plantations before. The real champion of this episode is probably the nature reserve fence. Say what you will about about Colossal Order, and they definitely fumbled the bag badly when it comes to City Skylines 2. But a lot of the DLCs actually contain like hidden gems of assets that I think are really good and worth using. Nature Reserve Fence is definitely one of those. But yeah, I believe this is the end of the episode, so please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments what you think about how the project is going so far. I have a Patreon and a Discord. The links will be below in the description. And please, if you enjoyed this and want to see more, uh, do me a favor and like, comment, and subscribe, and do all the YouTube things. Thank you for watching. My name is the Kumu Courtwade, and I will see you next time.